We're holding on, we're holding on the on 47b towards the top. One, two, three, four, five, 6 lines from the top. We were discussing different disqualifications of the lung in the animal. If you find these differences in the lung, these things on a lung of an animal, the animal will not be considered what we consider not kosher. So we discussed different ways, different appearances of it, different colors. And we're going to continue discussing which colors are. In other words, if a lung is normally a pinkish color, if the color is gonna change, is gonna be different, it's gonna look different. Those could disqualify it. When it's so Amar Rava says kikucha lakshera. When it's blue, it's gonna be good. It's kosher. It's not disqualified. Kidiyuta. But if it's like an ink color, then it's not going to be good. It's disqualified. Damar of Chanina. We're going to quote a member of a statement of Reb Chanina. He said regarding when a woman has her period, there's certain colors that are considered, and she sees certain colors. There's certain colors that are considered red and would render her impure, and in other words, any offshoots of red. So he said that black is actually red. Black is actually a red color, except it just the color changed, but it's really black. So to here by a lung, he's trying to say that it's going to be kosher because a lung's supposed to be red, and or some form of it, pinkish, and and no, he's saying that it's not good. It's a black is a red, and therefore the lung's supposed to be a pinkish color. The black is a red that got that had problems with it. It got infected or something like that. So it's actually black is not kosher. That's why we say kidiyuta is going to be not kosher. Kidiyuta means when it says black as black spots in it, because it shows the sign of rotting. Uroka, but when it's going to be yorok, we'll see what that means. It's really green. It's like a dark green. Kshera, it's going to be kosher. Midir Rabbi Nassim. So how do we know this from? When it's this color, it's from Rabbi Nassim. Aduma, when it's red. Kshera, when it's going to be red color, it's also kosher. Midir Rabbi Nassim. We also learned this out from Rabbi Nassim. So what's this story with Rabbi Nassim? So we have by every Jewish boy gets a circumcision when he's 8 days old. But that's provided that he's a healthy child. When he's not a healthy child, sometimes the circumcision has to be pushed off. For example, if the blood of the child didn't fully develop, it didn't go all over where it's supposed to go. In such a case, the giving the circumcision at that point can be considered can be dangerous to the child, and we don't give the circumcision at that point. So now, where the Gemara is going to discuss with these is a different case of these that the circumcisions were done prematurely, and the children died because of it, and that's why Rabbi Nassim came in. Rabbi Nassim, he stepped in to show, and he pointed out that these were premature babies or something like that, and he told them that they should not do the brit milah, the circumcision in those cases. So we have so from that we're going to prove that the colors of red and this greenish yellowish are actually healthy colors. They're colors that can change back, and it changes back to the normal color. Because we see there that what happened in the story was, we're going to see, was Rav Nassim just said, let it sit, and then it turned back into the proper color. So too by the lung, even though now you see it's a strange color, it's not an abnormality, because it'll eventually go back into the regular color, and it'll be healthy again. And that's why when you see these colors, it's not going to disqualify the lung. The Amr of Chanina, the Amr, no, we are a little further than that. The Sanya, we have this brisa. Reb Nassan Omer. Reb Nassan said, "Pamachas." He said the story one time. Alachti, I was going l'kracha ayam to the cities overseas. Basa isha achas lefanai. A woman came in front of me. Shemala b'na rishon. She circumcised her eldest son Umeis, and he died. Sheni, and then the second one Umeis, and he passed away. Shlishi, and then the third one Havia lefanai. She brought in front of me. Reisiv shaya adam. I saw that the baby was red. Amarti la, I told her, Biti, amtini la jivala damo. Wait till the blood gets absorbed in him. In other words, he still has a lot of blood in the surface. It should let it go throughout the body, and then he'll be healthy. And wait a little. All you need is time. Himtinullah, and then we waited. Umalos, and they circumcised him after they waited a drop. V'chaya, and he lived, not like the other two brothers. But Yikoron, and they were so ecstatic because that each survived. They called him. They named him after Nassan Bavli, this Rabbi Nassan that saved him. V'Yikoron Nassan Bavli al Shemi. Yeah. He said, I have another story. So that was with the color red. He said it was good because it turned back. It changed back with time into the color, the proper coloring it's supposed to be. I went to a certain place, Kapotkia. Basa isha lefanai. A certain woman came. Shemala b'na rishon umeis. Circumcised her eldest son, and he died. Sheni umeis, and the second one, and he passed away. Shlishi aviyasa lefanai. The third one, he brought in front of me. I saw that he was a yellowish color, I guess a yellowish greenish color. Tzatztibo, and I looked at it. It is a strange color, so I wanted to know what's going on. So he looked a little closer, and he saw that there was the blood hadn't gone all the way around. There wasn't enough blood in all the areas, so it wasn't. You couldn't. It wasn't healthy. It was not safe to give him a circumcision at that point. So Martila, I told this woman that came to me, wait until the blood circulates fully. Hamtinula, they waited for the child, Malosa, and then they gave him, and then only after he turned back to healthy color, Malosa, they circumcised him, and he survived, he lived, not like the older brothers, so and they called him Nasna Bavli al Shemi. They named him after me. This again another story, because he was the one that told them how they were supposed to do things. It wasn't in this case, the circumcision was not supposed to be on the 8th day because it wasn't healthy yet. We only do it on the 8th day when it's a healthy baby. Amar of Kahana. Okay, so now that was the colors, basically reddish and yellow greenish, and then there are other things that let's say the lung looks like the color of a liver. Of kind of the liver is a darker color. The lung's more pinkish. The liver is like darker, purplish, brownish. So if it's going to be that color, kshera, it's going to be that's a kosher color, and still the lung will be kosher, will not disqualify the animal. Kivisra, if it's the color of meat, treifa, that's going to be treif. We have a mnemonic, a sign to remember that when the lung, which is it looks like a light pinkish color, it actually looks like meat. It's going to be treif. What's the simna ubasar basada treif? And the verse we're quoting a verse that says, "And meat in the field is treif, is not kosher." Yeah, and that's mnemonic to remember that when it's like meat and it looks like meat, that's going to be not kosher. Amar Rav Sama, Berei de Rabu, Rabbi Sama, Berei the son of Rava says, and brings another few colors that are going to be slightly problematic. So high red, the damya kikshuta, uchamorika. These are different things. I'm not exactly sure what they are. They're all some sort of yellowish, a yellowish color, and as opposed to the yarok we mentioned earlier, which is more of a greenish color. Hyre the damya kikshuta chumorika gon beasan, like an egg. Shreifa. It's not. These colors do disqualify the animal. It's not kosher. It's not considered kosher when you find these colors in the lung. Eli Yeroka Dikshera. So what do you mean? We said earlier, here we're saying that these colors which are Yarok, which are yellow, are not kosher. Earlier we said the color Yarok, the color which we assume to mean yellow, was not kosher. So how can that be? Hey Chidamya Kikarti. That's what over there we're talking about when it's a dark green, like a karti is a dark green vegetable. So when it's dark green, that's going to be kosher color. Like we said earlier, when it's blue, it's going to be kosher color. When it's dark green, it's going to be kosher color. When it's yellow, that's when it's not going to be a good color. That's considered a color that disqualifies it. I guess now we're going to talk about in the lung. The lung is supposed to inflate and deflate fully. A healthy lung, the whole lung inflates when it breathes in. The whole lung can contract and expand as it breathes. But let's say there's a certain area of the lung that's sort of stuffed up, that there's no airflow there, and it's like a hard area. It's like it feels hard. There's no airflow there, so that Amar Ravina Atum Bereya, if it's stuffed up over there. So if it's going to be stuffed up to the point that the lung is hard and there's no airflow there, in such a case, that would disqualify the lung. But if it's going to be only because there's something else there that stops it, but really the lung itself does have an airflow, Mycena and Sakina, we would bring a knife. So how do we discern that? We bring a knife, we cut open the area over there to get to the inside of the lung, the area that's stuffed up. If there's pus there, it's definitely the reason why it's stuffed up is because of the mugla. But really, if the pus would not be there, it would be a healthy lung. It would expand, it would inflate fully, and therefore that's not going to disqualify the animal. It's just because of the pus that it's not inflating properly. Ukshare is going to be kosher, velo, and if it's not, there's no pus there. So we want to check if there's an airflow there. How do you check if there's an airflow there? We're going to put on these very light objects. That if we put on a godfa, which is a feather. You see if the feather flutters, that's going to tell us that there's airflow there. Oh, Roku, you put spittle there, maybe it'll bubble a little or move. If it moves, bubbles, then the animal's kosher because you see there is an airflow in that area. Velo treifa, and if it doesn't move, then you see that area of the lung is stuffed up, which disqualifies the animal, and it's going to be considered a treifa. Okay, so then certain times the animal may get a bruise, get a hole in the lung, but then it'll seal up, and there's a scar tissue or whatever grows over it, scar skin. So that Amar of Yosef, krum shalom achmas makabareya, if a krum, another membrane, a scar tissue grows, ain't no krum, that's not considered good enough to seal it up, because Rashi explains that it's not strong. It can easily develop a hole in there, another hole, even though now it's sealed. It not necessarily will last, and it's still considered a disqualified lung. V'omer of Yosef, that was one statement from Rabbi Yosef. He says another one, Hayreya de Avsha. If there's you have a lung that's making it, when you blow into it, it makes a noise. There's a noise coming out of it. So normally you'd think, where's the noise coming from? There's a hole that the noise is coming through, and that would be disqualification. But he's saying, Rabbi Yosef introduces that you can do a test to see is it actually noise because there's a hole, or maybe there's only a hole in the lower layer, as we saw earlier. As the lower layer has a hole, and then the air is blowing between the two layers, and since there's no hole all the way through both layers of the lung, it will not disqualify the lung. Ramar of Yosef, if it's making noise, and if you know there's a certain area in the lung it's making noise from there. The noise is coming. So manchinan Allah. So we would put on it again the same similar as before. We want to see if it flutters and with the wind coming out. So how do you see if there's a hole? You put in a gadfa, a feather, gila, or straw. Thank you. Or roka or spittle. And if it's gonna bubble or flutter or move, then that'll tell us that it's treif, because by that we'll be able to discern that the hole goes all the way through. Vilo. And if we don't see any movement on these things on the outside, even when we're blowing in and it's making noise, kosher, it's going to be kosher. And if we don't know where the hole, we don't know where it's making noise from, we don't know where the hole is, but we have to test whether there's a hole there. We can't just leave it like that. So we bring a bowl of water, pshuri, of lukewarm water, and we put the lung in that. Like it's like you check tires to see if there's a hole in it. You put it in the water. We don't put it in hot water because the hot water will shrink it, and when it shrivels the lung, then even if there was a hole, we won't be able to tell if there's a hole anymore. And we're trying to see if there's a hole and then in the lifetime of the animal, and that hole would disqualify the animal. But now we're taking the lung afterwards and we're putting it in hot water, and it's going to shrivel it up, and it won't be able to tell anything. So that you can't do. The low, you can't put it in cold water, the matar shila, because it hardens it. So it's going to harden it. You want to see if there's a hole that's going to get hard, and it's going to be either harder to check, or it's going to, some people explain it might develop a hole, and then it'll cause problems. Either way, we want to keep it in its most natural form, so we leave it in we leave it in lukewarm water. And if it's going to bubble, if anywhere in the water is going to bubble, it's going to be treif. And if not, it's going to be kosher. Why is it going to be kosher? Because they say only it's the tata inkiv, the lower membrane that got developed the holy law low inkiv, but the upper layer did not get a holy yet. V'hai, and this one, the afsha, and why is it making a noise? It's zika de beni beniu. It's the wind is blowing between the two layers, between the two membranes, and that's what's causing a noise. Okay. Now we're going along. Now we're going to discuss a lung that is disintegrated so much. In other words, it has the outer membrane is around, but the inside basically disintegrated so much that it's like liquid that it pours out. It's missing the whole inside of the lung, or parts of it. Amar ula, amar Rabbi Yochanan, reish nishpecha kakisan. If it pours from a flask, kshera, it's still kosher, as long as there's no holes. Even though the inside is missing a tremendous amount, and you think it's a problem, it seems to be a problem, but no, it's kosher. So what the Gemara derives from that that if something's missing, if the lung is missing on the inside, it's not a problem. It's not in other words, we said one of the disqualifications of an animal is if one of the parts of the body is missing something. Over here, it's missing a lot on the inside of the lung, but on the outside it's whole. So we understanding based on this that if it's missing, then if it's missing on the inside, that's not considered missing, and that will not disqualify the lung. Alma Kasavar, we see that he holds Chisarn Mibifnim, Lo Shmei Chisarn, that if it's missing something on the inside, it's not considered missing. So the Gemara asks, and that Asi Ve Rabbi Abba Ula, Rabbi Abba asks, Ula Harei Shenikva, a lung that was punctured or Shechasra, or it's missing anything. So my Chasra, what does it mean it's missing anything? So over there, it says the area that's punctured or missing anything, it's disqualified. So the Gemara is going to analyze, what does it mean that it's missing? My chaser, what does it mean missing? If it's missing something on the outside of the lung, in other words, there's a layer missing or something like that, Hainu nikva, that's the same as a punctured and developed the hole. Why would it be any different? Why would we think the ruling would be any different when there's a hole or when it's missing something on the outside? So it must be when it says that there's a one problem of punctured and one problem of missing, the missing must be on the inside. And we see from that, so we see in the lists of disqualifications is puncture and missing, and we just explain how missing has to be in the inside, because if it's on the outside, we know that already from the fact that puncture is a disqualification. So, and even though it's only missing in the inside, still it's a disqualification. So how can Ula say that lung that pours out from the inside, which is missing on the inside, missing tremendous amount of lung meat on the inside, it's still going to be kosher? It's not going to be disqualified. And that's the question. So the Gemara answers to that. Lo, leola mibachutz. Really, it's talking about missing on the outside of the lung. But we analyzed, the way we analyzed it was if you have puncture, we don't need to say missing anymore. So why do we need to say missing? Our answer is that it's on the outside. It's missing on the outside, and that's why it's not a question to Ula. But we still need to teach both punctured and missing. Rabbi Shimon, because we're teaching it according to one opinion. Rabbi Shimon has an opinion that punctures in the lung only render it unfit only if it goes all the way to the bronchioles, the tubes and the pipes in the lung. So when there's a hole in the meat, on the outside, he says it's not going to be a problem. But only if it goes all the way to the inside, then it's going to disqualify it. But he only says that when there's that's a puncture. That's what Rav Shimon disqualifies as a puncture. But when it's missing something, it's not just a puncture, but there's actually meat missing, like something like bit out of it, so to speak. Then it's going to be disqualified even if it doesn't hit the tubes, the pipes, the bronchioles in the lung. So that's what this Mishnah would be teaching us. In other words, we're talking about only this is the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. So he says that when it's punctured, and what does he say the puncture is? The puncture is all the way down to the bronchial tubes. It's going to be disqualified. Also, if it's missing, even if it doesn't go all the way down, if it's missing part of it, it's going to also disqualify it. So hani mili nekev. When did he say it disqualifies with the puncture? The less bechisaron. Avol nekev the isbechisaron. But when you have a puncture that is missing something, I feel Rav Shimon mode. Even Rav Shimon agrees that it's going to be a problem. Yeah. Okay. Rav Chananya Chalash. And then we're going to discuss. We have a story about the lung that poured out like liquid that we just discussed. And we said it's kosher. Rav Chananya Chalash. Rav Chananya got sick. Al gabe Rav Nassan. V'chol gadol eder. So all the rabbis came to visit him. Aisu kamei, and they brought while they were there. They brought in front of him a lung. Shenish b'chol kisan. They wanted to ask him a question. Does this disqualify this lung that pouring out like liquid? Does this disqualify the animal, or is it kosher? And he said, like we saw earlier, that it's kosher. Rava, and Rava pointed out on that. In other words, the whole inside could disintegrate, but it's only still going to be kosher if the tubes in the lung are still going to be whole. As long as the bronchial tubes are still intact. That's what Rava said. Amar le Rava. But if any of them disintegrate, it's going to be a disqualification. So how do we know if it disintegrates or not? So the Gemara is going to introduce. We have to do a test to tell that Amar le Ravacha Breda Ravav le Ravashi Minayadin. And where do you know that from? Amar le Maisinan Sa de Kunya. We bring a bowl that's covered in lead in
earthenware bowl.
In what?
An earthenware bowl.
An earthenware bowl. The kunya. That's glazed. That's glazed. Yeah, be'avor with lead. I think it is.
But they don't. When they say glazed earthenware bowl, basically they don't talk about.
Okay. So basically, you take a glazed bowl, and we pour it the lung inside this bowl. If you see white strips, white things in there, see that it's treif, it's not kosher, because those white things are not from the lung; they're from the disintegration of the pipes, of the tubes, bronchial tubes. And if you don't see kshera, it's going to be kosher, because you see there's none of these white things. That means you don't see any parts of disintegrated bronchial tubes, and that will be a sign that it's kosher. It's kosher. Amr of Nachman. Reya shenimoka, a reya that dissolved the krumshir l'kaim, and its outer layer is still intact. Kshera is kosher. Yeah, that's part of it. It's a little different than poured out. It's just part of it rotted on its own, basically, and it's still, but the outer membrane is still around. It's going to be kosher. Tanya nam yachi. So he brings a source that shows this. Reya shenimoka krum shalakayim. The Mishnah says that if a reya gets dissolved, then the outer membrane is still around. Afilu machzek is revius. Even if the cavity, the area, the cavity that's missing inside the lung can hold a revius, which is a certain measurement, a quarter of a log measurement. That measurement of water. In other words, there are a bunch of different measurements in liquid. This is one of the smallest measurements with regard to drinking liquids and stuff like that, and mentioned throughout Chazal. So if it can hold this amount, which is it's not a tiny amount, even if the cavity of missing lung can hold a revius, it's going to be kosher. Nitla shel puchis, if the that's the place where the fetus grows, and if that part is removed from the animal, it doesn't have the kshera, it's still kosher, because that's not vital for the animal itself's survival. And the problems, the disqualifications of the animal are only disqualifications that will harm the animal itself. Let's say its liver rotted. So this happened. This is actually a story that happened. And the people from Asya came and they asked. They came. They they came to ask the rabbis 3 times, 3 holidays when they were coming up. They're traveling to go where the rabbis were, and they didn't answer them twice. They went 3 holidays to Yavne. That's the city where the rabbis were gathered at that point. And they didn't answer. The first 2 they didn't get an answer. L'regel shlishi. On the 3rd time they came, finally they were able to answer the Terulim, and they said it's going to be okay, even though the liver's rotting. Okay, so now we're going back to discuss the lung. The lung, we mentioned earlier that if there are certain adhesions in the lung, it's going to disqualify it, because adhesions are a sign that there was a hole there and it's sealed up, or others explain that it's a sign that it will develop a hole. But let's say this is the case we're going to introduce here is when the lung is attached to the wall of the animal, the cavity. It's in the lung is in the animal's cavity, and it's right up against the back of the rib cage. So sometimes it can get attached to the top. So that's pretty much the case we're talking about now. Maybe we can find.
Not yet back by your
Hmm?
We go back 1 page.
No.
There was a picture of the whole.
Okay.
And that was the whole animal.
Oh, yeah. Here, I think this is the area. Here, I don't know if you can see it. You can. This is the area where the lung lies in. That's where the lung. It's empty. It's empty over there. The lung normally lies in there against the ribs, and there's the ribs, and there's meat between the ribs. So when the lung is going to be right next to the wall, and it's attached, it has adhesions to the wall. In choshesh and love, we're not worried about it. We're not worried that it got holes. Why? Because we say that the problems in the lung are going to be because of the wall itself. The wall, the side of the animal develops problems, and that's why we have adhesions to the lung. But we don't say that those were holes from the lung itself. In other words, adhesions we always say are because of holes. The question is where the holes were. So if in the area that is touching the back of the animal, over there we can say that the holes are because of the back of the animal, and that's why there are adhesions. And we assume that it wasn't from the lung. However, it's smachim if there are certain like blisters or stuff like that around the wall. Then over there we're going to be concerned that maybe there were actually problems with the lung itself. No, either case, we're always worried about it. Even if there's no smachim, these blisters over there, and there's only just adhesions between the lung and the wall, and the wall of the cavity of the animal, we still say maybe the adhesions came from punctures in the lung, and then they sealed up, and the punctures, when they were punctured, would be a disqualification, and we don't assume that it was from the wall. So the Gemara asks, so what do we do? We have 2 opinions, so what are we going to do about it? Who are we going to go like? Amar Rava, Ravan bar Shava, Asperli. So Ravan, this Rabbi Ravan bar Shava explained to me, my sinan sakin and the chalash pume. We bring a very sharp knife, and we separate between the lung and the wall of the cavity. And we check the wall. If there's going to be problems there, you see there are signs of bruises or stuff like that. Talin and basar dofen. We assume that all these adhesions came because there was healing up. The wall was healing up, and there were problems there, and then the lung is going to be fine. Vilo, but if we don't find any problems on the wall of the animal, machmas reahu, it's going to be all we're going to say it's all because of the lung, and it's going to be a problem. Utreifa. So earlier we mentioned that when the lung is giving off air, when you blow into it, air comes out of it, and over here there's no air coming out of it. No, in other words, the whole lung is sealed up, but that's because of these adhesions. So even though the whole lung is sealed up and there's no holes, still we say it's going to be a problem. It's going to be disqualified because these adhesions are a sign that there was a hole there at some point, even though we don't see it now. Yeah. Rav Nechemya Breder of Yosef Badagla Bipishuri. So when he found these adhesions between the wall and the lung, he would put it in water. He'd pull the lung out, and then he'd put it in water and we'd see a bruise in the side of the animal. He'd blow it up and see if there was any air coming out of the lung, and if there was not, he'd say it was okay. Seemingly not like we just taught. He did rely on the checking, and if there was no problem, if there was no ear coming out, he felt it was okay. Amalei Marzutra Bereder Avuna Bereder of Papi. So now we have the Marzutra is telling Rav Huna is telling Ravina. He tells Marzutra, he's the son of Rav Huna, son of Rav Papi. He tells Ravina that this statement of Rav Nechemia Bar Yosef that we just had earlier, that Hadr Nechemia Bar Yosef Atun Ahom Masnis. So what's the statement of Rav Nechemia Bar Yosef? That he would check it with water. So we taught it on this thing that when you find the bruise on the side of the animal, when you find these adhesions between the top and the bottom of the animal, the lung and the top of the animal, and you find bruises on the side, he would check it in the water. He would check it in the lukewarm water, or to see if there are any holes. So the Marzutra is saying that this checking, Atu Nahamas Nisula. He said you have this teaching that is talking about the case that we just mentioned. Anan. The Rav Masnislam, but we say that this checking he did in a different case. The Amar of Ahani Tarti Unidirea is a case when you have two lobes of the lung that are disrichan lahadadi, that they're attached to each other. Leis lubidikusa. So there's no, you cannot check it. There's no way to check it. Lachshuri. There's no way to check it. He said once it has an adhesion, we assume it's a hole, and when there's adhesions to the wall, the animal. We saw earlier that we said over there, where we say, no, maybe it came from the wall, and there's a hole, there are problems with the wall, and that's how it developed. But over here, there's no wall there's no wall to depend it on, to assume that it came from, because it's one lobe of the lung attached to another lobe of the lung. Let's see, maybe we can get a picture. Hold on. When the two lobes are attached, so we'd assume when the two lobes are attached, and then we're assuming that the adhesions are coming because of holes, then it's either one of the lobes, and both of them are a part of the lung, and that's going to be a problem. Here. So this picture here's an example of adhesions between. If you see these over here, the adhesion between the lung and the back of the lung. Here, like those are the ones we discussed earlier. That you see it's attached to the back, and over there the adhesion is a sign that there was we assume it's a sign that there was some hole somewhere, and we can the discussion we saw earlier whether we're told in the back. Now we're discussing between the two lobes. So on that, the Marzutra is saying we teach that Rav Nechemia, we teach Rav Nechemia's teaching that he's badlik labipishuri, that he checks lukewarm water when there's an adhesion between two lobes of the lung. Let's say like in this lung, let's say you have these lobes, you have an adhesion between one of these two, or from one to across. When there's adhesions, that's when we're discussing whether you can check it or it has, or you can't check it at all. So in Nechemia, we just taught that he told you could check it. So on that, Maskef Ravashi, he asks him this like we were discussing. He said, "How can you check it?" By us, we're talking about a case when it's on the wall of the animal. It's adhesions to the wall of the animal. So over there, we're going to say it's kosher. But when it's going from one lobe to another lobe, if whichever one of them has a puncture, it's going to be not good. It's going to be a problem, because we always assume that an adhesion is a sign of a puncture. So I can understand when you want to check on the lung and you see there's no puncture, then we're going to assume that it came from the wall. But when you're checking on the lobes of the lung, it came from one of the lobes, the whole. And if any one of them is punctured, it's going to be a problem. Behind Nakav Treifa, whichever one is punctured, it's going to be a problem. So how can you use this checking on that? How can you use the checking in such a case? That's what he asks on him. And then, yeah, so on that, so the Gemara asks a different question. Did Rav Nachman actually, not earlier we saw that Rav Nachman said that if it has tzmachim, if it has these blisters on it, then it's going to be a problem. Which you see from there that if we know for a fact that there's punctures in the lung, then it's going to be, if you know for a fact it's punctured in the lung, then it's going to be disqualified. So basically what we just said is what our question, Rashi is asking, so when there's a puncture in the lung, it's definitely a problem. So how can you use this checking to discern whether there's a hole in it? Regardless, once there's an adhesion from one lobe to another, it's going to be a problem. Then that's assuming, based on what Rav Nachman we taught earlier, that Rav Nachman said that when there's a definite problem with the lung, that's a problem. But then we ask on that, did Rav Nachman actually say that about Amar of Yosef Bar Yomi, Amar of Nachman, Reyash and Nikva, if a Reya had a puncture of a Dofen Sasamta and the wall seals it up, Shera, it's kosher. So you see, he holds even if there's a definite puncture in the lung, still it's not going to be a problem when there's something that seals it up, because when you have the lung right against the wall, it develops a hole, and the wall's right there to seal it up, so the hole's not going to cause problems. But you see from there that a hole in the lung is okay. So how can you say, why do you say by when there's smachim and there's blisters there's going to be a problem? Lo kasha. So the Gemara answers no. Over there it's when the place where the wall and the lung, they grow together, they're attached, they're right next to each other, so it protects it. But when did he say that the whole, when there's tzmachim, when there's blisters, is definitely when the signs of puncture of the lung is definitely going to be a problem? That's when it's not right near the wall. There's no area that's going to seal it up right away. There's no area that's going to seal it and prevent the hole. So over there we say that a definite hole in the lung is a problem. So that gets us back to our question. We had just asked that how can you say that when there's a adhesion from one lobe to another, it's still going to be okay, provided that there's after the checking or whatever we do after the checking. How can you say it's going to be okay? There's definitely a hole in one of the lungs. That we answer that. And over here, where's the makam revisa? Where's the place that they're touching each other? And because we just explained that the place where they're touching each other, where they grow along with each other, that's not the whole there is not going to be a problem, because they protect on each other. So too in a lung, it's going to be okay. That's chitur in the cuts where the slices of the lung. That's between every lobe. If you notice, there's a line. There's a line here, and then this is the front. This is the bottom. So there's a line there, and then it goes under. So adhesions between these areas, you can see it over there between under those creases, from the sides, from each side to each other. You can see. Those are going to be considered, and those are considered when they protect on each other. They protect each other from like there to there. They protect each other from the one to the one right next to it, and they grow next to each other. They can seal up. They cover each other, and that will, even if there's a hole there, it's not going to be a problem. Should we continue or should we stop here?
Probably stop here about 3 minutes too.
Okay, I think we'll stop here for today. Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.